All right, Jesse on Fire, welcome back to the channel. Let's talk about an actual for realsies topic because I know how everybody only ever wants to talk about Khabib and Conor. Just kidding. But Conor has given us a legit topic to talk about. Look at this. You guys seen this? Whoa. You guys seen this little picture that went on Instagram for the Max Life? The Mac Life, not the Max Life. The Mac Life? Nope. Well, if you didn't see it, I'll tell you exactly what it says. It says, which of these rematches would you guys like to see next? So, first time Conor's alluded to coming back out of retirement, which I guess no one's really super shocked about that, are they? I am a little bit curious if that has to do with the fact that it just came out publicly that he hasn't tested in 8 months, even though he's still on the USADA, he's still on the active list, but USADA has not tested him in like 8 months. Really bizarre. I don't know. I could just be connecting dots that are totally unconnected, but that is up today on the Mac Life. And this is a great post, man. I give them a real hard time because, well, I'm not sure if I've ever directly given them a hard time because, like I've told you guys, whoever manages his Twitter does an awful job. And Mix Molly and I found out that that it's the Mac Life that manages the day-to-day on Conor's Twitter. So, just because the Mac Life does it doesn't necessarily mean it's the same person doing Instagram and Twitter. But whoever did this one, this is a solid post, man. This is a very, very solid post. So if you haven't seen it, I'll tell you exactly what you're looking at. You're looking at Conor looking at 5, paintings or I'm sorry, photographs that are framed. One of them is him fighting Max Holloway, the other one fighting Dustin Poirier, the other one fighting Nate Diaz, the other one fighting Floyd Mayweather, and the other one fighting Khabib. And it's like, which of these would you guys like to see next, right? So, pretty weird post for a guy who's retired, right? And if Conor had to participate to take the photo, then you figure he has check marks signed off on this particular post. So I'm impressed by the creativity and it gives us a lot to talk about because each of those fights, there's a video in each of those fights, right? But before I do this, subscribe, ring the bell. If you guys haven't heard me talk about things like whoever's managing Conor's Twitter doing an awful job, believe me, those are solid videos. So you're going to want to know the next time I post something about it so you can see it and then go, oh my gosh, Jesse on Fire just posted a new video about blah, blah, blah. And if you're coming to this channel for the very first time, you just clicked on a Conor McGregor video and you're like, who's this clown? This clown is the future of this entire sector, okay? I've been doing this for like 4 months. And that's why you look and you're like, how have I never heard of this guy? Top quality production, top quality charisma. Looks like he's pretty funny to watch. How have I never heard of him? Brand new channel. So be an early adopter along with the rest of my bosses that are subs. So, subscribe, ring the bell, and then we'll go from there. All right, so Conor McGregor, let's talk about it. So we've got Max Holloway first, right? So that's the first one up. How realistic is that fight? Well, first of all, let's actually just rewind. So Conor is basically saying he wants one of these fights. And it's interesting because all of these fights make sense. Because Conor needs a fight. Conor needs a fight. Now, the only one that obviously, there's him and Khabib. And it's like, all right, well, obviously, if that's the route that he's going, it would be, well, I take that back. I'm not going to get ahead of myself because there's a narrative where he fights Khabib even if Khabib loses. So take that back. But let's just go in order, right? Because let's just pretend that for sure Conor wants to fight. Okay. So Holloway, I love that fight. And that fight makes a lot of sense. Like a lot of sense. And the reason for that is when I first look at it, I'm like, Conor's not going to cut to 45 again, right? He's just not. Like you can't IV rehydrate anymore. He's not going to cut to 45. And then I was like, but wait, why would he need to cut to 45? Max Holloway's not the champion anymore. He could fight him at 55, right? So a Max Holloway versus Conor McGregor main event at 55, 5-round fight. Whew. And honestly, have you guys considered that Max Holloway might be going to 55? It's not impossible. Not impossible. He went to 55 and he lost to Dustin Poirier, but it's Dustin Poirier. And candidly, I would say that particular fight might go the other way if they fought again because Max Holloway did the thing that he traditionally does, which is goes 60% for the first couple rounds. And he wasn't used to the reach advantage not being there like he normally has against guys at 45. And he got pieced up in the first couple rounds. Then he figured out the range and he did excellent for the remainder of the fight. That was an incredible fight, man. Incredible fight. Watch it if you haven't seen it. But point being is a Max Holloway fight against Conor McGregor at 55 makes total sense for both of them. It's a huge fight for Conor to come back. A decisive, like a win over Max Holloway matters, right? And he's a guy, and Max is actually a guy that you can slide in where even though he's not technically ranked at 55, that's a fight where if he wins and he won decisively, that puts him right in there for a title shot at 55, assuming that right now he's not just waiting the clock out for Gaethje and Khabib and he's going to fight the winner anyway, which is totally possible, right? Now, what do I think would happen in that fight? I think that Conor would probably win, most likely, because, you know, he pretty handily beat Max the first time. But Max Holloway, actually, this is interesting. Max Holloway said that prior to that fight, he had never had a striking coach. He said, this is not a joke, okay? I'm going to say this is going to sound ludicrous if you guys have never heard it, but this is 100% true. This is exactly what, it's true that he said it. I don't know if it's true, but what he said was, prior to the Conor McGregor fight, he had never had a striking coach, and he basically was implementing techniques that he saw on the UFC video game. That's what he said, okay? Now, also, I do think Max, you know, says a lot of things that are not actually true in the media. I think he like dicks around with the media a lot more than people give him credit for. Like, he's like a funny guy, and he's really, so people just assume like, oh, the guy's that's all smiles. He's always telling the truth, because why wouldn't he? I think he's actually kind of ninja inside of his mind, right? But he did say that, which even if it's not true, is hilarious. But the bottom line is Max Holloway's striking has gotten much better since the Conor fight, and I would say so has Conor's. So, I don't know. I mean, obviously in a 5-round fight, very, very different for Conor, right? He handily beat Max in a 3-round fight, but we all know Conor, round 4 and 5, not as good as Conor round 1, 2, like by a long shot. And Max is going to go all 5. So, yeah, I mean, I still would pick Conor in that fight just because I'll never pick anybody over Conor if they're going to stand with him. Like, if a person's going to stand with Conor, I'll always pick Conor. Always. Then you got the Dustin Poirier fight, which, you know, sounds like that's not realistic because Dustin's going to fight Ferguson. But I would love to see that fight at 55. I would love to see that fight at 55. And I'll tell you exactly what I think would happen. I think Conor would knock him out in the first round. Which is totally, I realize it's going to sound totally crazy to everybody because it's weird. The majority of people, honestly, that are like current active, hardcore, even guys that are hardcore, that are like, you know, I would consider a guy who's really excited to see Dustin Poirier fight Tony Ferguson. That qualifies you as a hardcore MMA fan in my book, right? Like those are two guys that are obviously amazing, but are not like super duper crazy mainstream like Conor, Nate Diaz, Masvidal, Khabib. Like those guys, those are the guys that like everyone knows. People know Dustin Poirier's name, people know Tony Ferguson's name, but they're not so mainstream that everybody is super hyped about a Dustin and Ferguson fight. But hardcores are, and even hardcores, a lot of them were not paying close attention back when Conor knocked out Dustin Poirier. It was a while ago, man. You're talking like 2013, 2014. And since then, Dustin, outside of the Michael Johnson fight, has demonstrated a chin that is incredible, right? Incredible. But here's the rule. Here are the rules with Conor McGregor that I have handicapped every one of his fights correctly, almost to the letter, right? Like, I mean, literally, like I have predicted basically every single one of his fights correctly, okay? I said that he was going to lose to Nate Diaz the first time when he had never lost in the UFC, and I was right. I bet it and won. I bet that he was going to win against Nate Diaz the second time. It all comes down, I think with Khabib, I said I was 50-50. I definitely didn't pick Conor to win. Like, I wasn't like, Conor's going to win. But here's the thing, and I'll go through this again because I'm very, very impressed with myself and my ability to handicap Conor with this very simple formula, okay? Here it is. First question you ask when someone's going to fight Conor, how likely is he to stand with him, okay? If the answer is very likely, then you go to the next question, which is, how strong is his chin? And if the answer to number 1 is very likely, and the answer to number 2 is anything other than granite chin, basically unknockoutable, then Conor's going to win by knockout in the first round, or maybe second round at 155. But he's going to win by knockout in the first 2 rounds. Plain and simple. And his entire career represents that exact formula. If someone is going to stand with him and does not have an absolutely inhuman chin like Nate Diaz, they're going down. Like, they're going down. Conor's that good on his feet, and his power is People just don't get it until they get in there with him, right? And Dustin has been knocked out twice in the first round, once by Conor and once by Michael Johnson, but he's been knocked out in the first round. And I'm telling you, Conor he is not in the same league as people on the feet. He's the best stand-up striker. The best MMA striker maybe in the history of the sport, and certainly that's even moderately active in the UFC now. I mean, there's just no one in the conversation with him, as far as I'm concerned. But going back to the formula, so let's say it's answer number one is not very likely. You know, the guy's going to probably take him down. That throws everything else out, right? Like, so if that's why Khabib doesn't fit into that formula, then you're like, okay, well, is Conor going to be able to keep him from taking him down? You know, so it's like, how good are his takedowns? Is Conor going to be able to keep him on the feet, etc.? And it goes from there. Or if answer number two in terms of his chin is absolutely granite, then you're like, how's his cardio? Because then you're like, because Conor's going to get tired towards the back half of the fight. What's that going to look like, right? And so, you know, there's just no one like Conor who is so decisively strong in one area and has such recognizable weaknesses, you know, on the other side, which is having to go deep into the fight and, you know, and obviously like guys who have the ability to take him down. I wouldn't say he has great offensive jiu-jitsu. At least I've never seen it, right? I mean, he trains with Dylan Dennis. He's obviously a student of the game and he improves every time he fights. So maybe at some point someone's going to take him down. And, you know, I mean, he's probably not going to fight that many more times, but he's just going to pull some he's going to flip around and do some, you know, I don't know, pull a triangle on some guy. And you're going to be like, what just happened? Right? He's got long limbs. You know, triangles are fucking hard for guys who have short limbs. Like, I can't imagine ever sinking a triangle on a full grown. Like, I put triangles on my kids all the time, but they're very little, right? Against a full grown man, it's a lot harder. You know, like, you got a lot of, you know, there's a lot of a mass to wrap your legs around. If these guys who have long limbs, you know, they pull triangles all day. Anyway, neither here nor there. Okay. So, yeah. That was the long form of, I think he would dirt nap Dustin Poirier. The next one is Nate Diaz. Okay, so that fight always makes sense, right? That fight always makes sense. And Nate Diaz has two fights that make sense for him. One is Masvidal and one is Conor, both rematches. And I don't see another one that makes a lot of sense for Nate Diaz because, you know, he's one of these guys that is a huge, now we've established a huge star. He comes off the bench for mega fights, makes $8-10 million, and then goes back on the bench, right? And Conor is obviously one of those ones. They're owed a trilogy, and Masvidal's the other one because, you know, got doctor stoppage. Who knows? You know, who knows how it was going to go in the fourth and fifth round. So as far as the fight goes with Nate Diaz, I don't see it going any differently than the second fight. I see that being the outcome every single time. Now, who wins? Who knows, right? But until someone shows me different, I'm just going to consider Nate Diaz essentially impossible to knock out. You know, I mean, Josh Thompson knocked him out with a kick to the head, but he still wasn't even out. And I mean, listen, man, like since then, he's had plenty of opportunities to get knocked unconscious, right? Like, or get finished. He's just one of those guys that is near impossible to finish. Now, obviously, every time he fights as he gets older, it's probably more likely that he would get knocked out. I mean, obviously, you bring Nate Diaz in when he's 46 years old and have him fight one of the best fighters in the world who has titanic power. Yeah, sure, he'll probably be able to knock him out. But right now, I have seen no evidence that he's there yet. So you got to assume that it's going to go deep. And as Conor gets tired, Nate's still there, right? So again, I will never feel confident picking a winner in that particular fight because I think that it'll be a dog fight just like the second fight every single time, which is probably why Conor, isn't anxious to take that fight again. He knows that, he knows. He got that win back, right? Like that was a victory the original fight was a fight that he never even intended to take, right? You got to think about that. Like the first Nate Diaz fight, the reason why him and Nate Diaz have this thing together is just by total happenstance, where Rafael Dos Anjos pulled out of the fight at the last minute and they got a last minute replacement that was up another weight class from Conor. Obviously Nate Diaz, he considered Nate Diaz a 155-pound fighter. He just couldn't make 155 in 2 weeks or whatever time. So Conor's like, yeah, I'll take it at 170. Another way, so literally it's like a fluke thing, happenstance that the fight even happened in the first place. But I think Conor is smart enough to know, he's got the fight IQ to know most likely scenario is an absolute 5-round dogfight. And I don't know, man. I get, like, I'm not saying Conor he's obviously not scared of a fight like that, but I think the fight is more exciting when the prospect of a spectacular knockout is on the table, at least, right? Yeah, and that fight's always there. There's no, and so that fight makes absolutely no sense right now, actually, because Conor is still trying to angle, in my opinion, he's angling for a title shot at 155. And normally I would just assume that he's just, as a matter of fact, I'm still assuming that he's going to get the title shot, right? Like, Khabib and Gaethje are going to fight, and then Conor will get the winner of one of the, of that fight. The only thing, you got Dustin and Gaethje Dustin and Ferguson getting put on the same card most likely. And if one of those guys, if it's a war, which it will be, you got to entertain that the winner of that fight would get the next title shot, because it's weird. If Ferguson beats Poirier, I mean, you're going to have a hard time convincing the world that he should not fight Khabib next, other than what happened last time, right? Like, the world has been very clear, like, let's not try to make them fight. And they're like, nah, let's do it again anyway. And they're like, global pandemic, right? So, but on paper, we still need that Ferguson and Gaethje fight. Ferguson and Khabib fight. So, I don't know. If Ferguson wins, then and Khabib wins, then that's one thing. But if Gaethje and Ferguson both win, then, I mean, Conor is certainly in line for the Gaethje title shot, because Gaethje already decisively annihilated Ferguson. Ferguson's going to angle for it hard, but we saw that fight, right? And everyone's going to want to see Conor versus Gaethje. And if Dustin wins and Khabib wins, we already saw Khabib ran through Dustin, right? But that right there is the one scenario where I think you might have a hard time getting Conor that fight, because Gaethje lost to Dustin Poirier, and I think Gaethje's going to be like, Gaethje also genuinely hates Conor. It's not an act. Like, he really genuinely has disdain for Conor, and I would actually bet you even more than Khabib does. Like, I think Khabib measures people in a different way than Gaethje. I don't know, like, I realize, like, that on paper they both look the same, where it's like, they both value family, they both value social work, but I just think that they interpret the world differently, where I think that for Khabib, the fact that Conor was able to go from being on welfare and win both championships and then have such a great showing against Mayweather, I think Khabib deep down has a lot of respect for Conor. Right? Even though he, of course, like, Conor intentionally created a rivalry there that's probably never going to, get squashed. But I think Khabib actually respects Conor, because Khabib puts so much emphasis on the outcomes of people's, career in the sport that he's dedicated his life to. Where Gaethje, I think, holds these things about family and what's the right way to act so deeply that he literally despises Conor. What Conor's accomplished has no effect on that at all. It's like, you're a bad person, so you could win 1,000 championships and I hate you exactly the same. I really genuinely believe that. And so when it comes to who's he going to give the fight to, Dustin or Conor, I think he hates Conor so much that he would rather give the fight to Dustin, because he knows Conor wants to fight him. And so you would think, like, oh, well, if he hates him that much, then bring him up and beat him up. No. The way if you really hate him is to not give him the fight, right? It's to not give him the fight. And if you're like, oh, well, isn't he a competitor? Yeah, he is such a competitor that he wants to go get that loss back. The guy that beat him, the guy that finished him, he's going to want to get that back. And then after that, then maybe, he wants to fight Conor. But so I think the only scenario where Conor is almost certainly on the outs is if Dustin wins and Gaethje wins. But if Ferguson wins and Gaethje wins, Conor gets the fight. If Dustin wins and Khabib wins, then Conor gets the fight. If Ferguson and Khabib win, then I think Ferguson gets the fight, right? This should probably have been a separate video, and that's why I'm going to probably edit this out and then just do a separate video about that, but we'll see. So anyway, all right, so moving right along, Floyd Mayweather, right? Now, Is there a scenario where Dana announces a rematch with Floyd Mayweather where the world doesn't go, are you serious? Like, are you serious? That's what you're going to do with Conor. You're going to rematch him against a 43-year-old Floyd Mayweather. Let me tell you actually why I wouldn't necessarily mind that, okay? Number one reason, I just want to see Conor fight, okay? I just want to see Conor fight. You know, like, I know he gets a bunch of flack because he said he was going to fight a season in 2020. Well, what actually happened was he said he was going to be ready for the April date when Khabib and Tony were going to fight, and then he was going to slide in when one of them inevitably fell out. But then COVID happened, and Conor has been if you haven't been paying attention, Conor's been a huge, like, COVID activist about locking down and being really, like, he's really hard on that side of the fence. Masks, lock down, do whatever we have to do to beat this thing. On my personal opinion is that he's angling to go into politics. That's honestly what I think. I think Conor is, and I'm not discounting his concern, you know, about COVID, but I think that he is leveraging the COVID situation to establish himself as a national leader so that he can run for office. And I absolutely think he's going to do that. Like, I almost can guarantee you he's going to do that. And my guess is Conor, being the type of person that he is, what's the ultimate amount of power that a person can have, right? Is to be a business person who holds the strings of government, right? You can't even fathom the amount of power that you can have in a country if you're the government or the governor of a state, and simultaneously your net worth was $600 million before you even started through multiple channels of income. I mean, so that's where I think he's going with that. But in terms of fighting Mayweather's eventually going to lose. I mean, eventually Mayweather's going to lose. And people will say, like, oh, you know, it's not the same. He's not the same guy. How awesome would it be if Conor's the one who beat him, right? Not some other boxer. Conor McGregor, the MMA fighter, is the one that beat Mayweather. And I don't think it's impossible. I mean, I watched that first fight, and I get it that Floyd was standing in front of him and trying to get him to tire himself out. Totally understand. But Conor had huge gaps in his game then, primarily his inside game. You know, where you're inside and it's like, you know, rip the body, you know, Conor just, for whatever, you know, like he had a real slappy thing about his hooks where, and it's not because Conor's not capable of power. It's just Conor's power was always these really, you know, kind of long strikes and kicks, because for MMA that's better. Like where, you know, it's really easy. It's easy to block a round punch, right? Like a round punch hits you over here. You know, that's easy. You know, blocking your face when a straight punch is coming down the cock. It's like, you know, especially with MMA gloves. I mean, you know, it's easier with boxing gloves. You know, you can go like this when it's coming down. I mean, but then you're open over here. But with MMA gloves, you know, a shot coming straight down the cock, you know, you just split right through that and punch him directly in the face. So it's not surprising, given how Conor trained his whole career, what he did. He went in there, like if you watch Notorious, they fought all the time, right? Like you would go in there, they would just do round after round. They were fighting, man. Like they were fighting, which is, you know, and so it's very unsurprising that, you know, primarily his weapons were these, you know, long straight punches where, you know, because, you know, the lack of a glove, you know, blocking a round punch is much less of a hindrance versus these huge boxing gloves that you can put right here, you know. So, yeah, I mean, I would love it. I would love to see. I just want to see Conor fight, but if he beat Mayweather, that would be amazing. And then the last one is Khabib, and I think I already went through that, right? Like the likelihood of that happening, it comes down to how those two fights shake out. Simple as that. I'm going to do a separate video just about that because that was so long. This video is so long. But yeah. So anyway, this is probably long enough. That's what I got. Subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, tell your friends. Peace.